You can find eerie stories in almost every corner of these isles, thanks to its long and often bloody history. From witch trials to dangerous criminals lurking in our city's shadows, gruesome tales of tortures to battlegrounds stained with blood. And all that history leaves ghostly footprints on our present. But let's face it, for centuries we've loved to listen and recount those eerie tales of our homeland. In books, on screens, but the oldest and my personal favourite is oral storytelling. There's just something slightly more chilling when someone recounts these tales out loud, all the while your imagination runs wild. So I'm here to take you on an excursion, off the beaten path and into the shadows, to hear from local experts about eerie tales right on their, and possibly your, doorstep. My name is Amy Gill, and I have always been fascinated by the dark stories from across the country. So, come with me as we embark on our very own eerie excursion. Today's eerie excursion leads me to the University of DeMontford's museum in Leicester. So I'm back at the very heart of the country in the East Midlands. Now, I'm sure many of you are bracing yourself for the ghost of a certain Yorkist king whose bones were found in a less than royal place, a car park. They were found in a car park, in case you forgot. But as you'll hear from my guides, Elizabeth.
My name is Elizabeth Wheelband, and I'm the curator for the DMU Museum.
And Stephen.
And I'm Stephen Peachy, and I'm the DMU Assistant Museum Curator.
The university's museum has so much more to offer.
So we are fortunate that our campus is situated on two ancient parts of Leicester known as the Castle Grounds and Newark Precinct, two really charming areas on the outskirts of the city that are a little bit less known in terms of the standard tourist path, which is really interesting to us because as we've learned through our research over the years, it has a little bit of everything. Notable names, famous battles, stories of treason, literary heroes, true crime, the list goes on. But on top of that, and why I love it so much, is it also has this underlying character, kind of a curious one that's layered with ancient traditions, folklore, and ghost lore. And that's what we'll be talking a bit more about today. So what gives us that mysterious atmosphere? Well, let's start at the beginning. And talk about our ancient origins and the mysticism that surrounds them. The site where we're standing now, just outside the Castle Great Hall, was first settled by an Iron Age tribe called the Coraltavi. And they were a Celtic people who followed pagan beliefs and would have had a druid or high-ranking priest in the community. Now, when we think of druids today, maybe we think of more like a magical figure, a sage or a sorcerer, that romanticism that kind of comes with the past and the unknown. They certainly were knowledgeable, particularly about nature, astronomy, and philosophy, maybe contributing to that enchanting persona. But they were also deeply spiritual leaders who were thought to connect the gods to their people. And because of this, they were responsible for identifying the perfect sites for their temples. Now, some people believed that they used a particular method to help with this process by sourcing ley lines, one of which we're standing on top of right now. But ley lines are a more modern term and a polarizing subject, but it's believed by some that ancient societies purposely built their sacred structures using alignments of earth energies. So these are said to be areas that hold more power and are therefore more spiritual or even otherworldly. So believers think that ley lines and this overflowing energy have the potential to blur the layers of time, making it easier to see or feel what we would think of as paranormal activity. Whether that's true or not, it definitely adds to the lore of this area being literally built on this supernatural concept. But if you do believe in it, we've got over 2,000 years of layers to uncover, which is probably why our paranormal investigation nights are so popular. So we have an interesting origin story at the very least, but a lot has changed since 50 BC, as you can probably tell. This area really develops into what we see today following the Norman invasion. So, just to set the scene, we're currently standing in front of the Great Hall. The original Leicester Castle would have been to my right on top of the motte that still exists today, the only bit of Leicester Castle to exist today, unfortunately. And the area that we're standing in now, below the castle, was called the Bailey. It was an enclosed area that had buildings that would contribute to daily life, like St. Mary de Castro, the church in front of us. It was the church for residents of the castle at the time. There were also kitchens, stables, a mill, a dancing chamber, and the Great Hall, the only original part of that castle structure that remains today. It's the oldest site that we look after, and it's my favorite. It doesn't look very grand from the outside, but it has an incredible history. It was once known as the Palace of the Midlands, showing how impressive it was at one time, and had loads of famous visitors over the years, including King Richard III, Geoffrey Chaucer, and James M. Barrie, to name a few. I also love a bit of true crime, and if you do too, this is where you're going to get it. The Great Hall is actually one of the longest functioning courthouses in the whole country, with over 800 years of trials being held here, including some of Leicester's most notorious, like the Green Bicycle Mystery of 1919. We'll have to save that for another day, otherwise your episode's going to be 4 hours long. But I will say the first record we have of a trial held here is from 1298. The unlucky recipient of that honor was sentenced to hang in the Earl's Court, which was the primary form of law in Leicester at the time. So we know amongst the other buildings that I mentioned earlier, there was a castle dungeon on the grounds where prisoners would have been held, and a gallows located just to my left, making the whole process from accusations to sentencing seamless. Morbid fact of the day. Most of those who met their end through hanging in the early days of the courts are probably somewhere on site with us still, as most were buried, and I use that term loosely, in the ditches surrounding the castle or in pits close by. So you may have noticed that the grass in front of us is bulging outwards into a dome. And that's because, as Stephen so delicately puts it during our tours, it's basically a multi-story car park of remains, probably from the gallows in the earlier years, and then an overflow from St. Mary de Castro graveyard later on. The courts were used until 1992. Fortunately, the gallows were not, but this building certainly has seen a lot. Most of the buildings in the castle grounds were deteriorating before or destroyed during the English Civil War. The Siege of Leicester of 1645 was particularly brutal, but fortunately there's still enough left here to help us paint a picture of what life used to look like over the centuries. But with all of this history, it's no surprise that the area has developed its own folklore, or stories and tales that have been passed down through generations. The most notable being Black Annis or Black Anu, the Newark's very own witch. So as we leave the castle grounds, I'll pass you over to Stephen, who will tell you a bit more.
So we're going to leave the castle area now and then enter the Newark area, which is now the DeMontford University campus. The area known as the Castle Bailey, and the castle itself, the Leicester public possibly started to call that the Old Work when a hospital or an almshouse started to be built, known as the New Work. So to differentiate the two sites, they started to call that the New Work in 1330, and that's been corrupted over the centuries into Newark. Elizabeth was saying about the ley lines possibly crossing over here in the Bailey area. Some have speculated, and it's quite a preposterous claim possibly, but that there could be underneath the castle mound possible remains of like a Stonehenge-like worship structure. And if ley lines are to be believed in, then it could be something that exists, and then that being why supernatural kind of things happen in the area. And what we're walking down now is Castle View. A pub has recently opened, which is very lovely. On the left here we've got St Mary de Castro's graveyard, Graveyard's nice and spooky. A Leicester legend known as Black Annis. She's said to patrol the area, and especially the turret gateway that we're approaching, this ruined sort of Tim Burton-esque looking structure. This is where she emanates from and comes out from.
So she comes out from this turret bit here.
Yeah. So the legend at the moment, and I say at the moment because it's different centuries have got different versions. But Black Annis is a blue-faced witch of Leicester. She's like an old crone or a hag. She's got long claw-like fingers with iron-like nails or talons, and she's got green sharp teeth, and she grinds those teeth, and when you hear them grind you know she's coming, so you can hide.
Stunning.
She's got a terrible howl. Yeah, she's a good looker. She probably uses this beauty spa that's just opened as well. But she's, if you walk through here at midnight, so that where I'm from there was a tale of Bloody Mary. You said that her name 3 times in a mirror at midnight. It's kind of this same kind of, noon and midnight are often like used as the marker for something creepy to happen.
Yeah.
But if children walk through here at midnight, she's said to grab them. And then there's an underground tunnel system. Possibly the Romans had tunnels here. We know there are actual tunnels underneath between the Chantry building we have on the campus site and the Trinity Hospital. But that's caved in. So maybe it's a corruption of like those tunnels existing and what was existing in the castle area.
Yeah.
But Black Annis is said to use a tunnel system all the way from the Dane Hills, which is now the Western Park area, Western Park Road. Those used to be rolling hills and fields, and a quarry area. I think a quarry area anyway. But yeah, she lived in a cave there and then would come here. But she would patrol that whole Dane Hills area back in the eons ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, she's kind of the folklore witch of Leicester. But she preys upon children, so she hunts children primarily, and she tears their flesh open, she eats them, and she uses a tree just outside of her cave that she dwells in, or used to dwell in, the bower, Black Annis's bower. And she would hang the skins on the tree and dry it out and then create new clothing. So she's a very sustainable witch. So we like her at the university. She must be doing her recycling. She's also an interior designer. She would use the skulls and the skeletons of the children to decorate her home, her cave. So yeah, there's a lot of sensitivities that she's got as well.
I feel like these episodes will need to come with trigger warning.
Yeah. Yeah, she's quite a gruesome lady.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the kind of legend that we know, and it's kind of from a guy called John Herrick. He was published in 1797, and he's got a whole history with his wife, Elizabeth Herrick. She was an abolitionist of slavery, working with a lady called Susanna Watts. But John, he died at 35 shortly after publishing this, and some people suppose that she wasn't happy that he wrote such a damning description of her and what she got up to. So that's one like speculation, or how the story is like thickened over the centuries. But he kind of, I guess, gave us our first written record or first written description of her and what she gets up to. But some people have supposed that she goes all the way back to like a Celtic corruption of a goddess like Danu. So Elizabeth said Black Danu or Black Anu earlier. It's not out of the realms of possibility that the D got dropped off and it became Anu, and then Anna and Anu being similar.
With the blue-faced witch, with the coral tovy having blue faces, according to the Romans.
Yeah.
So.
And this is very specifically local Leicester legend as well.
Well, there's
Very much so.
Cailleach, I think, is the Scottish and Irish. She's like a lady, I think, with a blue face as well, but I think she devours children. Or she's a goddess of winter. And then there's things like people's livestock. So at this time, like Black Annis would prey on children, but also the weak livestock. And it was in the winter period, but it's the weak dying because it's winter. Or the cold has meant they met their end. So it's people, when the plague's happening, they're thinking it's an act of God. So we attribute these folklores to explain kind of the unexplainable deaths, maybe. yeah, so the Danu is a goddess, and yeah, there's other. There's like Bridget and Brigid. They've got similar things. In Hinduism, there's Kali. She's a blue-faced deity that chops off the heads of children, I think, and she uses them as decoration, or she venerates them in some way. So I was really hoping there'd be a connection to John Herrick because he served in the army, and I wondered if he worked in the East India thing, and it was in India, and then found the blue-faced thing, and then brought it over, and then but that's not the case. He was based in Belgium and places. But yeah, there is actually a character in Leicester's history called Agnes Scott, and she's buried in Switzerland near Charnwood. And she, in 1455, died, and she was a Dominican nun. She was a hermit nun, and she lived in a cave. And she also treated, she had worked in a leper colony, so she treated people with leprosy. I don't think it's out of the realms of possibility that a woman wearing a black habit, living on her own, that's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
That especially during the Reformation, such a Catholic kind of thing, the Dominicans, like maybe the Protestants were trying to make a villain out of her, or it's weird, this lady's living on her own and doing these things and working with these unwell people, that parents, just to control their children, were saying she's a witch, she'll get you, or just to stop children misbehaving. And Black Annis is said to find the tastiest children to be the ones that misbehaved. But the story of the witch extends into Richard III. So it's become a part of the Richard III story, where a witch in 1486 was present during his procession leaving Leicester. Some tales say that he was visited by a witch at the White Boar Inn, which became the Blue Boar Inn upon his death. But this witch is said to, or this lady at Bow Bridge, she said his spur, so the bit on his shoe, is going to strike a stone, and when he is brought back to Leicester, his head is going to strike the same place. And then obviously he died, and his head is said to have hit the bit of the bridge. And then he was brought here and displayed in the Newark area for a bit. There is a folklore, or a tradition that was possibly pagan ritual being done in the 1600s. So Easter Monday or Black Monday, there was a pagan ritual, and that saw a cat dipped in aniseed, and then it was to mimic a hare hunt, and then it was dragged via a horse, and dogs chasing it, and the hunt began, and it would end at the mayor's house, which I assume is in town. And then in the 1800s, the cave and Black Annis's bower got filled in, and the area became a housing estate, I think by the 1900s. But and the tree that was outside the bower has become a stump. But at that time, if the cave's filled in, well, that's her home and her dwelling. The legends sort of come to our campus now. So she's said to live underneath the Leicester Castle in the basements and the cellars of the castle.
She's trying to find another dwelling.
Possibly, yeah. But this name Cat Anna seems to be what she's being referred to as now. But like Anna isn't too far away from aniseed, than anise, so the star of anise and these kind of things. Like if it's dipped in these herbs, these tasty herbs for the dogs to chase. So Cat Anna might be a cat dipped in aniseed, is what she's become. All these corruptions and misrememberings, or things have become multifaceted and layered and just confused. But so that's how she ends up coming here to campus. So don't walk under here at midnight,
especially if you're a naughty child. Have you guys ever seen Black Annis?
Seen a dark figure, and then it was actually a student film, and they were basing something on the legend. So in a way, I've not seen any witches in the area. No one with blue face.
And not to give us away, but we're both over 18, so I don't think we fit the child description.
I know that the landlord of the pub, his small boy, he dared him, but it wasn't at midnight. They were just going home, and he said, "Go on, go say her name under the gateway." And yeah,
Maybe some people after last orders at the pub have seen
Yeah.
Black Annis.
But we
Yeah.
don't know how trustworthy their
Yeah.
accounts could
Yeah.
be, but yeah.
they've probably done their health and safety. I think they close at 11, maybe to avoid
Really.
any deaths and
Yeah.
things. But yeah, she's an interesting thing, and yeah, the tale of her seems to be in the Leicester consciousness, and zeitgeist and everything. Yeah. So we've managed to escape Black Annis by walking under the turret gateway, and she didn't come out and see us. But
Live another
this
day.
used to be a 2-story building over the gateway, and it was the porter's lodge. So he would control the portcullis between the religious precinct and the castle precinct. So you can still see his fireplace there. But in 1832, there was some election riots, and the Leicester public took it out on this building. So it's in this regrettable state, or sorry state now, but it's very charming.
It is atmospheric.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, so that's what we're walking through at the moment. So this is the turret gateway. Sometimes it's referred to as Prince Rupert's gateway, but that was actually a different building. But again, it's like a corruption thing. Like we lose that building, and then maybe grandchildren that saw that their grandfather showed them the original Prince Rupert's gateway. They've then returned to the site years later and then gone, I'm looking for there's the gateway.
Yeah.
That must be the gateway my granddad was on about. So yeah, it's just how like folklore changes, and yeah, it's ephemeral and fleeting, and but facts are important.
Exactly. So true. Yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of wish that like you could just go back in time just to give somebody like a camera or a smartphone.
Yeah.
Yes,
definitely.
yeah,
Be like,
yeah.
You just take pictures. Like don't ruin
Let me
anything.
Google that for you.
Yeah. I'll find it.
Yeah. So what we're walking into now is actually the Newark precinct itself, but it looks a lot more like a university campus now. It was heavily changed during the industrial period as factories went up and chimney stacks. But what's always remained is the Trinity Hospital Arms House. It's possibly Leicester's oldest charity, maybe. I don't know, someone will fact check that, I'm sure, that's listening. And it exists on the other side of the river now. But that was built in 1330. And then there was these kind of buildings here, this was built in the 1500s. This is Wigston's Chantry House.
If you could describe what the house is.
So it's a cobblestoned, kind of ready-looking 2-story chantry house. A chantry house is a small dwelling for a couple of priests and a couple of deans. You're too busy to pray, and also when you die, you want to ensure someone's continuing to pray for your soul. And this was the accommodation for those people to be doing that on your behalf. So you would be a rich person like William Wigston. I think he was a wool merchant. So he was like, I'm going to set up a little foundation and have some people live here, and they can pray for me whilst I'm alive, and definitely once I'm dead to get me out of purgatory.
Yeah.
We've got another one over there, which is a couple of 100 metres away, called Chantry Building today. But that used to be the vicarage as well for St Mary de Castro. But underneath, in the basement of that building, there's said to be an entrance to a tunnel, and that's a tunnel that runs underneath the road and apparently ends at the chapel. And there is archaeological records. So the Leicester Archaeological and Historical Society wrote an essay on it, I think in the early 1900s. And then I think you can get it on the Dora, which is the archaeological public domain download to learn about that. Why?
We've gone out of the realms of folklore.
Oh yeah, the folklore.
We'll bring it back.
Well, the reason I bring up the tunnel is just that there's, Black Annis
When
is
you're
said to
talking
traverse.
about archaeological reports, I think we've gone too far.
Well, I'm merely saying Black Annis is she overlaps. There's a Venn diagram here, and there's Black Annis, and then there's tunnels and archaeological records. So we're aware of these things, and they're just the tip of the iceberg. And then underneath, there's just people making up stuff, and then these legends grow and they grow and turn into something else. So what we're entering now is the entrance to the DMU Museum. So we're going to be going into the basement of the Hawthorne building today. But
And you may wonder why our museum is located in the basement of a university building.
So what this used to be is the crypt area or the subterranean area to the church. It's the Church of Annunciation of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And this was built by Henry Gromont. He was the first Duke of Leicester and Lancaster. He was the first Knight of the Order of the Garter. Good friends with Edward III. And he was gifted a thorn from the crown of thorns by the French king. And this might be, outside of France, the only Sainte-Chapelle possibly in the world. And so basically a chapel built around the thorn from the crown of thorns, a thorn. So 1352, this was built. So today, what kind of looks like a medieval McDonald's sign are actually, if you look on this model here, we have a 3D printout. You have to go down the little steps and then you can see that we're in the basement area of the church. So these only survived the Reformation period because they were underground. And this was the site in 1486 for Richard III's body to be displayed to the public. So Henry VII, who had just killed him at the Battle of Bosworth, he needed to make sure the Leicester public were the first to see Richard dead because they were the last people to see him alive. So one day later, he was like, look, you saw this guy yesterday, he's dead and I'm the king now.
So we can't talk about history in Leicester without bringing up Richard III multiple times.
Did you hear about him? The church, it was a Lancastrian church, so Henry VII was claiming obviously a connection to that family line, and this was the best place. He didn't have a Twitter page, so he had a family church to show everyone, look what I've been up to. But the building and the site of the museum that we have, spooky stuff, I guess, happens here, would be fair to say. There's stories of technicians, there's a lot of science subjects that are taught here on the health and life science faculty. They say about seeing monks half submerged in the ground. So just their torso they see, but then the ground level would have been different then. So
bringing up that idea of ley lines and the layers of time all over again.
Like a thinning of our reality and something that happened, like a video playback maybe is what they're seeing. And then people saying that they hear, especially in the lift shafts, like Gregorian or like some medieval singing, some chant.
That was the first day that I worked here. So back in 2015, one of the technicians came down and said, I'm a man of science, you know, but strange things happen in this building, so you might not want to be in here alone at night. And I was like, okay, what do you mean? And he talked about that you can hear this Gregorian chanting, and that they've seen monks floating up and down the corridor. So, yeah.
And that didn't put you off working here, so that's good.
No, it didn't.
I think,
Not seen any of that, but we've definitely had some encounter, both of us, in this space.
I was working at the desk. This is a couple of months ago, so really I've been working about 9 years. We've been working together 9.5 years. And often what you would see when the curtains are open, you can see into the breakout space we have, and the vending machines only alight automatically if someone is next to them, otherwise they're dormant. So that goes off, but you're like, well, it could be like a little fly or anything, someone upstairs banging the floor or something. But I was sitting at the desk and it was someone breathed down my neck or up my neck, someone blew on my neck. And there is a vent there. So I was like, but that's going in that gallery. It's not actually anywhere near me. It's not directly underneath me. So I don't know. That was the weirdest thing I had here. Our closing time is 4 and that happened about 3. So I just closed and left. I didn't really want to. I was like, I'm done. Not too many people today, so it's fine.
That's fine.
But your one sounded weird as well.
It was, I can't remember when it was, but it was during an exhibition changeover. So everything was a bit busy and chaotic, but there was a quiet moment where we were both working on a desk in one of the temporary galleries off to the side. And Stephen often likes to play practical jokes. If you work with him, it just kind of comes with the territory. He likes to jump scare a lot and kind of all that sort of thing. So I assumed it was him, but I was just sitting over there working. You had gone out, I think, for a coffee or something. And I just felt this push on my back, almost, like someone had come up behind you and like, And I turned around to kind of tell you off, and there was nobody there. And yeah, a similar thing sort of happened last year as well. Well, I was sitting at the same desk that Stephen was talking about. I had somebody come up, and I just felt this like hand on my shoulder, and nobody was there. So we lovingly refer to this ghost as Henry Grossman, who built the church. We just assume it was him. So yeah, he's quite the character anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised.
He's quite a lascivious gentleman, as we know from his memoirs. So it's
Yeah.
not surprising that
he loved
the ladies' attention more.
Yeah, loved the ladies of Leicester.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
At least it's nothing too malicious.
No, nothing too malicious. And it hasn't stopped me from working here, so it's not that bad.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed hearing about some of the eerie tales from DMU's museum. As always, the door is open for you to come and visit for yourself. In fact, as Elizabeth mentioned, they do their very own haunted tours. You can find out more about them and the museum in the links in the show notes below. But if you do, be careful when you cross that threshold. You may just come face to Blueface with a witch. That's it for now, but you can follow this show on YouTube and Instagram at Eerie Excursions, where you can see pictures and videos of the places we visited today. And to be sure you don't miss out on an excursion, follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'll see you next time for another venture into the darkness.